Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you an OP Vex build in Borderlands 4. After her recent nerfs, we went with an updated version here that is a whole lot more powerful, as there's some changes to how certain aspects of this build work. Now, you can see here, Reapers are going to hold all the aggro for us, which lets us stay alive. They also get lifesteal, which keeps them alive, so we can do crazy amounts of damage between our guns that is going to drain our shields. Now, a brief overview of how this all is going to work. Now, I'll be showing you a different skill tree because there's actually a quick swap if you don't want to use kinetic-based weapons. We're actually going to use the right-hand skills tree because you can get +3 to our max stacks. You can actually get massive boost to our gun damage, but I think that bleed is going to be the best because what's great about this is there's actually a lot of items here that are going to increase our overall damage that does transfer over to bleed, especially if we're using something like an amp triple bypass and watts for dinner, which will boost our gun damage up even further, which is also going to increase the amount of bleed damage that we deal. Furthermore, Ars Arcana, which recently got a buff, is actually going to impact skill damage a little bit different from action skill damage. This will apply to our Reaper damage, it'll apply to bleed damage, and if you went with something like Bloodshot, it applies to that as well. There are a lot of class mods for this as well that can give us red skill tree, like this one here, which gives our minions lifesteal when we get kills, and this will scale up to 3 stacks. And again, you can make that 6 stacks, making us pretty much unkillable because it's applied to us and our minions. And then on top of this, our minions and ourselves can also get overshield, and then when we have overshield, our minions deal even further damage. And since we're going to have full health, also the skill roll is nice for the extra damage there, but we're kind of having all 3 skill trees here, with our Capstone giving us 2 Augments, which gives us further sustain, with the Coven giving us health regeneration, and this which heals them on hit. Now, one thing I like about this build is it's not very gear dependent. You can make up for deficiencies in your gear depending on the skill tree selections here. So I'm going to show you a couple different grade ones. So the Sanguine Fiends here, this gives us health restoration, which is really nice because every time we take out enemies, it keeps our minions alive as well. Furthermore to this, we can take 2 stacks of that and 3 stacks of idle hands here. So this will give us 8% health restoration per kill. And then also reload speed, which on guns like the Hot Slugger is just straight up DPS. It's going to increase our overall damage. However, I don't love this selection here. I think it's a good one if you want to be able to get some sustain. But when we're using the Reapers, we actually get more bang for our buck with this here, with the Felt Inscriptions, which increases our minions and ourselves health by 30% and increases our melee damage by 35%. This also sets up some other styles of builds, but you can also use this here if you prefer using quick reload guns or guns that you want to have fast reloads with. Now, I previously posted some Cursed Blades build. I don't think that's the absolute best choice. And actually the Portents of Suffering work well here because status effect damage is going to apply if you're using elemental weapons early game, and then later on when we spec into Bloodletter, this is affected by a status effect application chance and is a status effect. So this increases the overall bleed damage, which is great because that's stacking on top of any boost that we get to our gun damage, which causes the bleed, as bleed is triggered off of our gun damage as a percentage. However, if you don't like to go with the bleed, Grave Assault is incredibly good because this would going to give us an increase to 7.5% fire rate per stack, and you can get 3 stacks. But again, if you get the one that gives you 3 extra stacks, that's effectively giving you 6 stacks, insane amounts of DPS. So the choice here, I'm going with bleed, so I'm going to be taking the Portents of Suffering, but Grave Assault is also quite nice. And once we make it down here, the Grave Fiends is just by far the best choice. So there are some selections here you can go depending on what gear and stuff you want to roll, but my favorite fell inscriptions, the Portents of Suffering, and into Grave Fiends. And I guess for the first augment that will be taken is Coven here, which will give us health regeneration. We almost always want to be using Reapers unless there's flying enemies around, and then you can pop out a Spectre, which has a little easier time getting to them. But the Reapers actually get enemies that get glitched into walls and stuff very well, so that's one nice thing. Now, once we get down here, we do want to also potentially swap to Hellish Harvest. I find the survivability is better once we get down here. Ideally, once we get down to the bottom of the skill tree, we'll have both. So it's just you use this one from around levels 5 through to 15, and then you're going to swap to the Hellish Harvest here. And then once we get down here, the prismatic weaponry is pretty fun. However, this is a little bit tricky because this incentivizes you to use multiple attunements. So again, if we're using kinetic damage, we're not going to use this one because it's a little bit tricky to keep swapping to different elemental attunements to get that boost to the overall damage. It gives you 30% bonus damage, which is really nice, and it's elemental damage that changes, which a little bit brings an RNG factor, which I don't really love. And for that, I actually do prefer the Obedient Fiends here. So this increases our minion damage. Again, we already increased their melee damage, so this is another flat out increase to their damage here, and that's just a really good thing to take. So we want to have that because the minions actually do a okay amount of damage, enough to keep the enemies occupied and chip down their health a little bit. And they can also apply bleed too, which is great. Now, I like to take 1 stack of Death Falls Closer just because when we get low health, you probably need a panic button. You may be out of Reapers. This spawns a nearby Reaper. You don't have to take this if you don't like it. You can instead go all in on the Ancient Rites. But I also like to take the Spirit Bomb here because this will give them an increase their overall health, 36% health to our minions, and then also Spirit Bomb damage, which whenever they die, they create a big explosion. It's not a huge damage type or amount of damage, but it's enough, and it's the extra health that we really want there. Otherwise, you're going to get 40% extra minion damage, 40% minion damage, or 36% extra health. It's really down to that. You honestly can just put the 4 points into this because that's going to give you a pretty good boost to your overall damage. It depends, though. If you find your minions go down really quickly, maybe take Spirit Bomb instead. I prefer to... It's really tough. These both... I haven't noticed a huge difference between the two of these, but this takes us down to the Dark Pact. So we can now equip 2 Augments, which we're going to want to put on the Hellish Harvest and Coven for the great survivability that this gives our minions. But on top of this, we also get a special ability that lets us press and hold F, or the action skill ability, and then it's going to create a... basically, our clones and our minions won't take any damage, and then it resets the amount of damage that they take over time because it scales up over time. So this gives them a lot of survivability, and it increases their attack speed, so their DPS goes up. I don't really like taking the Capstone ability here. It does give you an extra charge, which is really nice. There's a decision we can make. At this point, I think it's best to go into the green skill tree. Now, as I mentioned, if you're going to go with the kinetic damage and focus on bleed, I like this because it gives 10% life steal to increase reload speed. It's really good. And attunement lasts for 6 seconds, so you can swap to another one and keep that life steal if you want to, let's say, use like a shock-based weapon to reduce a shield, like the Oh My God. So this can keep the life steal on you. But that's not to worry because there is that class that gives us 10% flat life steal. Now, as mentioned, you can take the right-hand side here. This gives us increased critical hit damage and gun handling on kill skill. 3 stacks. The critical hit damage is actually really nice because that's going to trigger our bleeds and give us even crazier damage numbers. But at this point, I think Bloodletter is good here. This will give us the ability to apply bleed. I'm sure you all know how bleed works, but just to keep it brief, we want to hit big procs of damage off critical hits, and bleed will only trigger on critical hits. So that's something to keep in mind, because if you're not hitting critical hits, you're not hitting bleed. So if you notice that you're not getting these procs, you may want to use like the critical hit knife, which did get nerfed, but still works on this. Just a heads up on that, because I've seen some comments, people talking about bleed not triggering. It has to be off a critical hit. But if you don't want bleed, again, you can take this Grave Implements here, which gives you 20% extra gun damage. And what's crazy is it's 3 stacks, so that's 60%. But then if you get the plus 3 extra stacks, it's 120% extra gun damage. Crazy stuff, especially when you get the grave sites there as well. I'm not going to take that because I like the bleed aspect of this. But again, for people that don't want to spec into bleed. And what's cool about kinetic damage boost is actually kinetic damage is... So it applies to our base damage number, which is calculated for bleed. So 30% of the gun damage per second. Anything that increases that, that's going to be... it'll be basically taking that gun damage boost, and then the bleed is triggered off of that. But the status effect damage increase also applies to this as well. So we're getting a huge boost to overall bleed damage. And again, if you don't want to take that, you go with the Grave Power 3 stacks. Pretty crazy stuff there. And then you can put... Target Prescience is a little tricky because with the critical hit knife, which is currently bugged and it will get fixed in the future. So if you're watching this in the future, you can take this. The critical hit knife locks you at 30% critical hit rate. This will give you a chance, and it doesn't interact with it properly. So at that point, you can go with one of the previous options here, like for Guns and Needles, which is kind of interesting, which will give you a rep kit back quicker. And there's actually some really good uses that we can apply with this. But at this point, I think it's best to come down here. Ars Arcana got a nice boost. This gives us 45% extra skill damage. And again, skill damage is triggered on our bleed. That's considered a skill damage. Our minions are considered a skill damage, so this boosts up their damage. And then on top of that, if you want to go with the Bloodshot, it also counts for that. Now, for the last point, I think that it's good to go with the Essence Leech. Some of these other ones just don't really fit the build very well. Maximum health capacity can be nice because this will actually make you really survivable, but this is more so if you want to do a Bloodshot. And I think that we're avoiding Bloodshot for this and doing instead Amp Shots because we can get our life steal back, which I'll explain in a moment now. Essence Leech at 6% is nice. Now, the double effect doesn't actually work. When our action skill is active, it doesn't really trigger properly because it counts as active when you hold up your hands ready to summon something in. So it's just a flat out 6% life steal for us, but that's still really good because that's just going to keep us alive and keep our shields full. At this point, again, I'm leaving 1 point there. You can put all 4 points into the Essence Leech. However, I mentioned that this one here, you can take this at the end if you want that extra charge for your minions, so you can have 4 minion charges. I've been saying minion so much I feel like Gru here, but the Teen Witch class mod is my personal favorite. There is one that's specific to this class. Whenever you go with the Illusionist, which causes your Reapers to become badasses, which is nice. However, it's not as good. The Teen Witch just is by far the best because the skill rolls on this are way better than the rolls that you can get on this one. These are all blue skill tree rolls, which we're able to get if we wanted them. This gives us all red skill tree, and there's one green skill that can roll for this. This is my ideal roll for this. I would prefer something a little differently. I do have ones with have skill critical hit chance, which makes our minions critically hit, but I don't like the skill rolls on that one. And this one gives us 60% action damage, which is also extremely good because action skill damage is our minions. So you could go with something like this, but I just found that this skill roll works best. The increased shield capacity is nice too. Now, you can go again with the illusionist if you really wanted a badass Reaper. It's fun, but I just don't like the skill rolls. And Undead Eye can work too. Like I have a really good Undead Eye with the kinetic damage, which is glitched out right now, and then the sniper rifle damage, which applies to the bod. Kind of a fun roll. Now, for shields, there's a few really fun ones. I really like the super soldier. If you can get one with an increased shield capacity, like this one here, having 25% boost to a shield capacity when equipped, and this will also then give you 16% boosted maximum health and 40% damage resistance. This makes you pretty much unkillable, and then when our shield is full, we're going to have the fire rate. However, using something like this, the Watch for Dinner gives us a little bit more damage in my just setup because you drain 35% of your shield to get 150% gun damage. Now, this is where it's funny because we have lifesteal, so we boost our gun damage 150%. That actually gives us more lifesteal back, which gives us more shield back. It's actually a funny looping prophecy here. So with that, we're going to also have overshield, which gives us 25% bonus shock damage. I love the Watts for Dinner. It's just a really fun shield. You can use Cinder Shelly as well. I like Cinder Shelly and even the Timekeeper's new shield because this one's going to give you maximum health, which gives you a little bit extra sustainability. But I found that the Team Wish just doesn't work as well. If you use this, the Undead Eye works really well. I just think the Watts for Dinner with this amp roll is crazy and worth using. And for our, when we go into our enhancements, there's a few good choices as well. This one's going to give 40% ricochets on non-critical hits, which is fun. You can go all in on something that's going to give you critical hits, and the bounce pass, this one here gives a increased increased ricochet by 1. If you're using something like Hot Slugger, TK's Wave, the Stray, these 3 would be really great for this one. But you can also go with something that's going to impact the Vladoff there, given fire rate and magazine size and increased projectiles. This one is pretty good if you're using Vladoff type weapons because this will give you gun damage. I got a gun damage roll on this, which also does apply really nicely to the bod. But enhancements are really hard to find specific ones. There's no set farming, so you're honestly just going to be using whatever you got. Not always the most ideal rolls, but gun damage is going to be preferred because that ends up giving us lifesteal and extra bleed. Now, I think the critical hit knife, despite its big nerf, is still a great item to have here. It gives you a flat out 30% critical hit chance. It'll soon be a plus 30% critical hit chance, so you can use different skill tree points. And this is really good because those critical hits are going to stack our bleed, and that's going to give us some massive damage. And then on top of this, yeah, there's other choices that you could go with, like anything kinetic based, like the Atling gun is fun, but the throwing knife just ends up still being the best. Even through its nerf, it's still really good. And the triple bypass, this one takes forever to farm, so if you don't have this, leech on use is pretty crazy for 10 seconds because we already have so much leech, so you're never going to lose. You basically won't lose your shield with this build. I also like the Enrage, which increases your damage dealt by 30%, which in turn increases your bleed and then also increases your life steal amount, but increases the damage taken. This one can be fun because it lasts for 10 seconds. You just basically enrage and do a bunch of extra damage. And the tank is also kind of funny too because you get decreased damage taken by 50% for 10 seconds, and especially when paired with something like the Super Soldier here that gives you damage reduction as well, you can become insanely tanky and pretty much unkillable. So there's some pretty fun rolls that we got here. Now for weapons, the bot is still going to be the best on every single character, so I'm just going to mention it here, especially if you can find I have the worst roll. SMG is not that great. Sniper is going to be a bit better, and you can also get it with pistol ammo, and those are going to be a little bit better. AR is also not that great. I also love the Stray. This is one of my favorite guns, and this also can get the Jacob's License accessory. It's going to be a kinetic-based weapon. It has 2 additional bullets, and when you ping off critical hits, it can actually do some pretty crazy damage, and paired with the bleed, it's got if you can get a Ripper part on it, I think that this is a very solid weapon overall. I also showed off the start there TK's Wave with huge DPS. It also it has a Tory License magazine, which is nice, but the Jacob's License accessory makes it chain around, so if you can get critical hits, it does crazy damage. And then it also has a spread launcher, which is insane damage as well. Hot Slugger, always going to be one of the best weapons on any type of build too. I also really enjoy the GMR here. This does kinetic-based weapon damage. It's not going to be high damage, but it shoots really quickly, so you can actually do some pretty crazy damage with this, and it'll also ricochet your pellets around. And also some of the purple shotguns like the Dullahan are also really nice on this build. And if you're going to use elemental weapons, Katagawa's Revenge got nerfed really hard, and Hellwalker aren't really worth using, but Plasma Coil is one I like because you can get your shock damage and break down shields that way. And the Convergence got nerfed as well. It's still a decent gun, all things considered. Wombo Combo, I actually like this on any build because it'll break through Vile Crystals really easily. And for our Specializations, now, this one's really funny because whenever we have full health or shield, we get a 30% boost to our damage, and we get this often. The damage dealt is really nice, so we want this one. Now with Caffeine, whenever we use our Repkit, we get our action skill cooldown, which gives us our minions back a little bit quicker. This is just a really nice one to have as well. You can also go with the Riddle You This here, which will increase your gun damage whenever you fire shots up to 50%. This is a good one, just flat out increase your overall damage output, but you can swap it for other things if you really wanted to. I Am a Gun's interesting because your action skill damage now increases with your gun damage increases, so anything you got in the skill tree that gets you more gun damage will also apply to our minions, so that can be good, especially if we have some of these skills here that give us like the potential 120% bonus gun damage when you get rolling with that, so that can work really well too. I also like the Bullet Train. I've used in the past the Groundbreaker. This still works, but it's not as powerful. They actually just changed on the previous patch, so it's no longer going to be as crazy as it once was, unfortunately. And that was a big component of one of the previous builds with the Reapers because they would set this up, but it's still viable. It's just not as good as some of these other options. You can also go with the critical hit chance for action skills, but I found the I Am a Gun works better. And when it comes to combat, we really just want to be focusing on obviously shooting at the boss here, but having a split of aggro. So our minions, we can summon them in, and you can put them in a way where if there's additional enemies that are kind of bothering you, you can pop them near, and they're just going to go shredded and farm their health off of them. But you can see there, we get a lot of extra shock damage from the bod here, which applies to things like shock damage from the Watts for dinner, which applies to the bod, and it's pretty good damage. And really with this build, you can face tank because we're getting so much overshield from this that even if we're getting hit by direct attacks there, we're going to be able to overshield and also keep up that extra amping damage because we will drain when our shields are full. We'll drain it 35% of our shields, which is like literally a third of our shields to be able to give ourselves an extra 150% gun damage. So we're getting our life steal that basically keeps us back up. Obviously, I'm not aiming very well for the head here, but you get the idea. You can just basically face tank anything. There's obviously guns that are going to be a bit more powerful. I did not let the Ripper charge up there. If you can get headshots off, the bleed damage will be really nice. This is obviously not going as fast as some of the others there, but... And you can also amp yourself up with your Repkit there before you fire a shot, because that's going to give you an increased damage number as well, which is also going to give you increased bleed, so that's really good, especially if you use any of the triple bypasses. That's going to give you an increase to your overall life steal as well. But you see here, just going with the TK's wave, you can actually get some pretty nuts damage. Don't get too close though, because it does chain around, but yeah, the Reapers will hold the aggro for you, so you don't have to do things like that. But we got it. And with the Watts for dinner too, it's going to leave a bunch of extra like shield boosters that you can pick up, so you're encouraged to move around as well. Always keep your Reapers up as much as you can, and you can use the Hot Slugger here and just hold down your mouse button and press the reload button to be able to shoot. And this is where getting the reload speed increases are kind of nice, because we're doing a lot of reloading with this gun, so if you can boost that up, it just gives you further more damage. And this also can work with, funny enough, the Kickballer, which I thought would get a pretty hefty nerf, but you can see there, it's still working as crazy as it ever has been, especially because you can get critical hit chance naturally with this skill tree. So yeah, it's a pretty good choice too. Splash damage be damned though, you just gotta watch out for that. But that is a build for Vex with the minions in Borderlands 4. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.